Vincent Willem van Gogh is one of the most celebrated and mythologized figures in the history of art, a man whose very name has come to symbolize the archetype of the tortured genius. His life was marked by intensity, struggle, and unyielding passion, and though he died in obscurity, his work today defines entire chapters of modern art. Born on March 30th, 1853, in the small Dutch village of Zundert, his life spanned only 37 years, but in that short time he created more than 2,000 artworks, including around 860 oil paintings, along with countless drawings, sketches, and letters. These works, often painted in furious bursts of inspiration, continue to touch audiences with their raw honesty, vibrant colour, and emotional depth. The tragedy of Van Gogh is not only the suffering that consumed him, but also the lack of recognition during his lifetime, when he sold almost nothing, lived in poverty, and relied almost entirely on the financial and emotional support of his younger brother, Theo van Gogh. His story is one of the most extraordinary in the cultural record because it illustrates the paradox of genius. A man who failed in nearly every earthly measure of success while alive, but became immortal in death, changing the way humanity perceives art, emotion, and expression. Van Gogh was born into a religious and disciplined household. His father, Theodorus van Gogh, was a Protestant minister, and his mother, Anna Cornelia Carbentus, was the daughter of a bookbinder. One of the most haunting details of his life is that he was named after an older brother who had been stillborn exactly 1 year to the day before his own birth. This meant that he grew up in the shadow of a lost sibling with the same name. And throughout his life, Vincent struggled with identity, feelings of replacement, and a profound sense of spiritual displacement. Childhood for Vincent was shaped by introspection and solitude. He was sensitive, intense, and more drawn to nature and quiet observation than to social games. He found solace in wandering the countryside, sketching plants, animals, and the fields that stretched beyond his village. In his teenage years, Vincent's path seemed uncertain. He was not academically gifted, and though he was intelligent and perceptive, formal education was never his strength. Instead, practical work came into his life when at 16 he secured a job at Goupil & Cie, an art dealership in The Hague, through family connections. This was his first structured exposure to the art world, and though he was not yet an artist, he developed a keen eye for paintings and prints. His work at the firm took him to London and later to Paris, where he was exposed to a wide array of art and culture. These years broadened his understanding of art's role in society, but he was ill-suited to the demands of the trade. He was too serious, too moralistic, and too emotionally direct to thrive in the commercial world. His employers found him unsuitable, and his career as an art dealer came to a halt. His time in London, however, was personally formative. Vincent lodged with a landlady and became deeply infatuated with her daughter, Eugenie Loyer. When he confessed his love, she rejected him, saying she was already engaged. This heartbreak shattered him, and it set the tone for his later romantic life, which was marked by loneliness, frustration, and repeated rejection. His emotions, always intense, became darker. It was during this period that he turned with great seriousness to religion, immersing himself in the Bible and imagining that his destiny might be to serve God as a minister like his father. Vincent attempted to follow a religious path with fervour. He worked briefly as a teacher, then as a lay preacher, before pursuing theological study. He eventually became a missionary in the Borinage, a bleak coal mining region in Belgium. Here he lived in poverty, embracing a life of extreme sacrifice to serve the miners. He gave away his possessions, wore rags, and lived in conditions more desperate than those he ministered to, believing that Christ-like poverty was the way to reach souls. His superiors, however, saw him as eccentric, unstable, and unfit for the ministry. After a period of struggle, he was dismissed. This rejection devastated him, but also forced him into a period of reflection that ultimately turned him toward art. It was in the Borinage that Vincent began to sketch seriously. The suffering of the miners, the dark landscape, and the human condition became central themes in his work. He decided, around the age of 27, to dedicate himself fully to becoming an artist. For a man who had failed at nearly everything he had attempted, this was a radical decision. Yet it gave him a sense of purpose he had long lacked. With Theo's encouragement and financial help, Vincent began his artistic journey. His earliest works were sombre, inspired by the realism of artists like Jean-François Millet, whose depictions of peasant life deeply influenced him. Vincent admired the dignity and endurance of working people, and his early canvases often show labourers in fields, peasants at meals, and rustic scenes rendered in dark, earthy tones. His most famous work from this period, The Potato Eaters, 1885, epitomizes his attempt to show the rawness and honesty of rural life. The figures are coarse, their faces lined with hardship, their meals simple, and the colours heavy with brown and green shadows. Though criticised at the time, it remains one of the great statements of Van Gogh's vision of human dignity amid suffering. In 1886, Vincent moved to Paris to live with Theo, who was then working as an art dealer. Paris changed his art forever. Here he encountered Impressionism and Neo-Impressionism, meeting painters such as Claude Monet, Camille Pissarro, Edgar Degas, and Georges Seurat. He was captivated by their use of light, bright colour and brushstroke, and gradually he abandoned the dark palette of his earlier works. He experimented with bold, expressive colour and dynamic strokes, developing the unique style for which he is now famous. Paris also introduced him to Japanese prints, whose flat planes of colour and innovative compositions had a profound influence on him. Despite artistic breakthroughs, life in Paris was stressful. The crowded city, the demands of social life, and Vincent's own mental health struggles made it difficult. By 1888, he decided to leave Paris for the south of France, seeking light, colour and tranquility. He moved to Arles, where some of his greatest works were born. The yellow house he rented became both his home and studio, and he dreamed of founding an artist's colony there. His friend Paul Gauguin eventually joined him, and the two lived and painted together, but their relationship was volatile. Vincent was excitable and intense, Gauguin was proud and temperamental, and their collaboration ended in disaster. The most infamous event of Van Gogh's life occurred in December 1888 during a breakdown after a violent quarrel with Gauguin. In a fit of despair and instability, Vincent mutilated his ear, cutting off part of it and delivering it to a local brothel. This shocking incident became the defining myth of his life and symbol of his madness. Afterward, his mental health deteriorated further and he was hospitalized several times. Yet even during these episodes, he painted prolifically. Some of his most celebrated works were created during his stay at the asylum in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, where he admitted himself in 1889. Here he painted swirling skies, olive groves, irises, and wheat fields, giving shape to his inner turmoil through colour and form. His famous Starry Night, painted from memory, captures both his visionary genius and his psychological torment. The sky spirals with cosmic energy, the cypress tree rises like a flame, and the village lies still under the night. An image that has become one of the most iconic paintings in history. In May 1890, Vincent moved to Auvers-sur-Oise near Paris to be closer to Theo and to receive care from Dr. Paul Gachet, a physician sympathetic to artists. During this period, he painted feverishly, completing more than 70 canvases in the last 2 months of his life. His works from Auvers are filled with energy, vivid colour, and restless motion, fields of wheat, stormy skies, twisted trees. Yet beneath this productivity lay despair. He worried about being a burden to Theo, whose health and finances were strained. On July 27, 1890, Vincent went out into a field and shot himself in the chest. He managed to walk back to the inn where he was staying, but 2 days later, on July 29th, he died in his brother's arms. His last words reportedly were, "The sadness will last forever." Theo, devastated, died only 6 months later. The two brothers, bound by love and sacrifice, are buried side by side in Auvers-sur-Oise. Vincent van Gogh left behind a legacy that was not fully recognised until after his death. During his life, he sold perhaps only one painting, and he was seen by many as a failure. Yet within decades, his work was being celebrated for its originality, emotional honesty, and daring use of colour. Today, Van Gogh's paintings rank among the most expensive ever sold, and his art fills museums and draws millions of visitors. His letters, especially those to Theo, reveal the soul of a man striving desperately to find meaning, to create beauty, and to express what could not be spoken. His life story continues to inspire books, films, and countless studies, not only because of his tragic fate, but because his art embodies the human condition itself: sorrow and joy, struggle and beauty, despair and hope, all rendered in strokes of colour that still vibrate with life more than a century later. The complete life of Vincent van Gogh is one of the most extraordinary narratives in the history of culture. From his birth in a small Dutch village to his death in the fields of Alvars, his journey was filled with rejection, passion, madness, and genius. He was a man who failed at nearly everything he attempted in his life, but who succeeded in leaving behind a body of work that altered art forever. His paintings are not simply images on canvas. They are living testaments to the intensity of feeling, the tragedy of isolation, and the possibility of beauty, even amid despair. His legacy is immortal, and though his own life was brief and marked by pain, his vision continues to inspire and move the world.